This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
According to a new report from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the vast majority of human trafficking victims, some 71%, are women and girls, and 1/3 are children. On today's show, we'll learn more about human trafficking, what it is, what it looks like in our community, and what you all can do to help put an end to it. And joining me now is Lizzie Adams, Director of Public Relations for the Salvation Army of Wake County, and Courtney Milam, Project Fight Coordinator, also with the Salvation Army of Wake County. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start, because I think that over the years, especially with January being the month, National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, more people are starting to talk about human trafficking and really try to get an understanding of what it is and what it looks like. So let's start with that basic definition. What exactly is human trafficking?
Well, human trafficking is considered widely as a modern form of modern-day slavery. This is where a person is exploited for labor or sex purposes. So the trafficker will do that by the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So what we see, what that looks like is maybe they'll be physically forced into doing this, or through forced drug use. The fraud might be they'll be told that there's a legitimate job, when in actuality there's no real job. The coercion might be a threat to a family member, or it might be a boyfriend that says, if you love me, then you'll do this for me.
And so, with that, what human trafficking is, it's a criminal enterprise. It is a $150 billion industry, which has grown from what was it, 32 billion a couple years ago. So the more information, the more awareness, we start to learn some more facts and statistics. And so it's disturbing, because that is the second largest, only next to guns, I believe. And when you think about it, you can sell guns or drugs once. A person in this context can be sold over and over again. So they become a reusable commodity. So it's a terrible, terrible thing that you would never want anyone to go through. But unfortunately, it's happening worldwide and right in our neighborhood.
And I know that with this being the Awareness Month for National Human Trafficking, there have been concerted efforts here in North Carolina just to kind of help raise awareness and then to get support for victims. Talk a little bit about that initiative that's going on here in North Carolina that includes a number of different people and organizations.
So I think in our work with Project Fight, we work with a number of different partner agencies. And so it's wonderful to see all those different efforts from different industries come together to say, we're not going to have this in our state. So it's the campaigns like what Fox 50 is doing with Project No Rest, and just getting the word out there that this is an issue, it's real, it's a reality that's happening in our own backyard. So the way that we tend to go about it is we offer trainings and say, are you wanting to learn more? We reach out to different, whether it's corporations, community partners, it might be a church, school, anywhere that someone might come in contact with a potential victim or survivor of human trafficking. So to see it kind of coordinated across the state is really encouraging.
And even when you hear the term human trafficking and people are starting to talk about it, they still have a hard time believing that it's happening right here in North Carolina, right here in the Triangle area. Talk a little bit about the prevalence of human trafficking.
Well, I think you're exactly right in that, first of all, the name in itself is misleading. And I think, a person can be trafficked. They can be from Raleigh and they can be trafficked right here in Raleigh. I think we also get a lot of our pictures of what we think trafficking is from the media, from movies like Taken. And I know that's what I thought trafficking was in the beginning. And once I began this work, I started to realize that's not at all what we're seeing. It could look like I said, a girl who grew up here in Raleigh who's being trafficked in a hotel on Capitol Boulevard. Or it could look like a worker who I mentioned earlier who was promised a job, a legitimate job here in the States, and when she gets here, she's told, well, the job's not real, but you owe us all of this money for your travel for coming here. And so in order to pay us back, you're going to have to do this. And what we find is that she never actually reaches that debt. She never reaches that goal. Other times it can also look like a farm worker who comes legally on an agricultural farm working visa. But because of that visa, they're tied to a crew leader. And this crew leader may hold their papers. The crew leader is never actually paying them, is threatening them with guns, threatening their family. And so this farm worker is afraid to leave, both because they're afraid for their safety, but also because their visa is tied to this farm worker and they don't understand the laws of this country.
So in terms of like how prevalent it is, I think an international statistic is over 20 million people are currently enslaved. Across the U.S., it's hundreds of thousands through the Polaris hotline, which is the national hotline, or excuse me, Polaris Project with the national hotline. And then Courtney, I know you guys have seen a real jump in the past couple of years as far as
yeah, we've had actually since 2011, which is when we began, we've had 343 referrals. Most of those have been just from the Triangle alone.
Wow.
127 of those have become cases. Just last year alone, we had 93 referrals, and 20 of those have become cases.
Wow. And are these cases are cases of people who are living here in the Triangle area?
Both.
And in need of help.
Both. We're seeing exactly people who have been brought here from other countries, people who are from here in the Triangle area and who are being trafficked here, or people who are from the U.S. and are moving through our state and through our area on our interstate systems.
All right. Well, knowledge certainly is power in this case, and certainly want to help people try to navigate and understand what to look for, and really understand that this isn't always necessarily like what we see in the movies. We're going to take a break, and we'll talk more in just a minute. Still to come on Tar Heel Talk, recognizing the signs of human trafficking in your area. We'll give you the red flags when we come back. Today's show focuses on human trafficking and efforts underway to help educate the public about this crime. The Salvation Army has a project called Project Fight, or Freeing Individuals Gripped by Human Trafficking in North Carolina. And with us again to tell us more is Lizzie Adams, Director of Public Relations, and Courtney Milam, Project Fight Coordinator. They're both with the Salvation Army of Wake County. Now, before the break, we were talking a little bit about what human trafficking might look like in different situations, and we also talked about how it really does take a community effort. Several different agencies and organizations and companies working together to help raise awareness and support for victims. So let's talk a little bit about those community-wide efforts and how that's playing out here in North Carolina.
Well, when we started the program back in 2011, it was very much with that goal of providing comprehensive case management, but also raising awareness and education. And some partners right off the bat include organizations like PathNC, and they're working with other agencies like legal aid, medical service providers, mental health providers. Law enforcement is an incredible partner because you're really coming together to not only provide services, but to inform people that this is happening, and this is some of those warning signs that where you might encounter a person. It might look like domestic violence, it might look like gang involvement, or it might look like any number of things, but when you start to ask more questions, you realize this person has been trafficked. So to come together in press conferences and really raise awareness like PathNC did today was wonderful.
And I know that Fox 50 has produced 2 PSAs to kind of help raise awareness and understanding of what human trafficking may look like in different situations. Let's take a look at one of those and then we'll talk more about it.
He said he was my boyfriend, but I didn't choose this. He made me feel special, so I did what he wanted. Now I'm trapped. Does anyone know what he makes me do? Why can't anybody see I need help?
Human trafficking victims are forced, fooled, or frightened into performing labor or sex acts for money. If you or someone you know needs help, visit projectnorest.org.
And again, you're talking about what human trafficking might look like. You know, that's in a case where you see supposedly a boyfriend and a girlfriend in a relationship. Talk a little bit about the PSA we just saw and how that can play out in an everyday situation.
Sure. We actually do call that a boyfriend pimp at times.
Okay.
And it is a very much a relationship. And that's where it becomes hard to see the signs. And it looks a lot like a domestic violence relationship. And that the very person that's providing for very real needs, very real emotional needs that you have, is also the person that's victimizing you, that's exploiting you. And so, you know, she can want to leave, but she also doesn't want to leave the person that provides this love for her. And so those signs are often hard to see. Sometimes it's going to look like she's unable to make decisions for herself. She may not be able to answer for herself. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
But I mean, I know that there are a lot of different things. Like she was just saying, you know, why can't someone help me? She looked very sad and withdrawn. So, you know, there again, her classmates being observant, friends and family being observant.
Exactly, and we've seen situations in the past where it's that very thing. You know, people are presenting, or particularly a student is presenting like they're at it, they don't care. That they're tired, they're just kind of very standoffish, and it's like, I don't care about school, it's the trouble kid, the bad kid, or something like that. But in actuality, they are being trafficked at night or off of school grounds. So those types of things, by even holding an awareness that this exists and being thoughtful enough to ask a couple questions, check in with those particular kids, it could lead to bigger answers. And we hope it's never trafficking, but it could very well be that case. And so there's so many factors that go into any particular situation. And I think that's what Courtney was speaking to, is every case that we see is different. The one commonality is vulnerability. So a trafficker will zone in on that, whatever it might be, and exploit it.
Right. So there's another PSA that kind of expands on, you know, the vulnerability of various populations throughout the state. So let's take a look at that one and we'll talk more.
You've seen them all across North Carolina. They come from all origins and backgrounds, just like you and me. They work on farms, in hotels, shops, in your neighborhood. But when you look closer, you'll see it's not by choice. Human trafficking victims are forced, fooled, or frightened into performing labor or sex acts for money. You can help when you know what to look for. Learn the signs of human trafficking at projectnorest.org.
Again, that is a PSA produced by Fox 50 as a part of this community effort to help raise awareness about human trafficking. When you look at that PSA and talk about, you know, think about some of the clients you've worked with, this is very real, and I think it's important for viewers to know that it's happening right here in our backyard, so to speak.
It is absolutely. That PSA specifically, I think, speaks a bit more to labor trafficking and our agriculture, and we have, you know, a very vast agricultural industry here in North Carolina. And I think it's something that can be happening right under your nose, just like sex trafficking. And I think that oftentimes we don't realize, and these signs, they are very hidden a lot of times. And as Lizzie said, it does take, you know, maybe having that conversation and taking a bit of interest. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take those relationships for someone to come forward. It's going to take a lot of trust. And that's something that they don't necessarily have anymore.
Right. And a lot of times they're afraid, especially if they're not from this country, they're afraid of being forced to leave. So there are lots of different factors that go into that silence.
There are a lot of different barriers, and whether that's knowing, having an awareness of cultural practices in this country, legal rights, what they can or cannot do. A lot of times, as I think Courtney mentioned, maybe documentation, identification is stripped away, and they are told that you cannot go to police. You know, they are going to do X, Y, Z to you, or you cannot seek refuge here or there. You are solely dependent on me, and I can control you. So it might be that it's physical force that keeps someone there, but it could also be kind of more of these mental locks and chains where people don't think that they have anywhere to go because the trafficker has created this this vacuum for them that they are it in their eyes as far as resources and any available help.
And Project Fight works to help connect victims with resources available throughout the Triangle. Talk a little bit about the program and how that works.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, it stands for Freeing Individuals Gripped by Human Trafficking. And so for us, what that looks like is comprehensive case management services. So it is connecting that client with whatever services it is that they deem they need. So we meet a client very much where they are, and we ask them their goals and their needs. And it's through these amazing community partners and these collaborations that we have that Lizzie spoke about earlier that we are able to meet those needs.
And people can find out more information by going to the website projectfightnc.org. We're going to take another break. We'll talk more in just a minute. Up next, what you can do to end human trafficking in North Carolina. Tar Heel Talk will continue after these messages. Welcome back to Tar Heel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. Studies show that almost every country in the world is affected by human trafficking. The United States, North Carolina, and the Triangle are no exceptions. The Salvation Army has launched a program that's working to provide awareness and support to human trafficking victims and the communities in which they live. And we've been discussing Project Fight and human trafficking as a whole. With us again is Lizzie Adams, Director of Public Relations, and Courtney Milam, Project Fight Coordinator. They're both with the Salvation Army of Wake County. Talking about the many different scenarios and cases of human trafficking and how it is happening here in the Triangle in North Carolina. What are some of the cases that you've seen firsthand that might be important to share?
Okay. Well, we mentioned, farm workers earlier, and early on that was not recognized very readily. And I think it's harder to recognize.
Right.
Because it does. It looks like an everyday job. We depend on migrant workers very much in our state for our farm workers. But we've seen cases recently. I mentioned it a bit earlier with, it's called an H-2A visa. It's an agricultural work visa. And people will come here to work legally. They're often tied not to the farm owner with this visa, but to a contractor that will get the work for them, and they will move these farm workers from state to state for the work. Now this is very legal, but what happens is if you have a corrupt contractor, the farm worker may not know that this is happening, but the contractor can be holding the documents. He's saying, under the guise of safekeeping, but he's holding on to the farm workers' documents and they can't leave. He's keeping all of their pay, again, under the guise of safekeeping. He's threatening them if they do leave. And what we find is that our clients, because their visa is tied to this man, they can't leave or they're in violation of their visa. And so oftentimes they don't leave. They're living in poor living conditions with little to no food. They're working extreme long hours every day, and they're being threatened physically and physically harmed.
Wow.
And they feel very trapped. It may not, as Lizzie mentioned, the chains may not be real, but they are, or physical, but they are very real.
So in a case like that, what type of assistance could a farm worker in that situation get?
Well,
I guess what would be the first step to getting some help?
there are actually some great organizations. Legal Aid of NC has a farm worker unit, and they go out to the farms and do specific outreach to these farm workers so they understand the laws and that what's happening to them is not legal at all. And so we start there. And that's where a lot of our referrals come from, especially with farm work. And so then, as I mentioned, we start where the client is and what their needs might be. A lot of times with farm workers, they have very little to their name. And so we'll start by providing food and by clothing and personal care items, the simplest of things. From there, we can connect them to immigration attorneys. Because they are trafficked, they are entitled to what is called a T visa. And they can then stay here in this country legally and work legally because of what has happened to them. We can also bring their families over so that they're able to be reunited with their families. And so, like I said, we really just start where our clients are and with what their needs are in that moment.
All very important information to know that they do have some power, some rights here in this country. I think the more that we can get that message out, probably the more likely someone is to speak up and say, I need help. People can contact you through the Salvation Army of Wake County to get this process started. Your phone number is 919-834-6733, or they can log on to the website wakearmy.org and certainly begin that process of connecting and getting some support. All very important information as we talk about human trafficking in North Carolina and how to put an end to it. What are some of the things that we as residents of the area should be on the lookout for? What are some things we need to pay attention to?
Well, I think we've kind of touched on a couple of different ones. When you see someone that has no voice, there's someone constantly talking over them. They don't seem to have the opportunity to make any choices for themselves. That lack of control is a real big thing. So whether that is in an agricultural setting, whether that's in a restaurant setting, it could be a nail parlor, a massage parlor. So a lot of different situations. Nannying is even sometimes can lead to that. And we're not saying that every single situation is automatically trafficking, but those are ones that we have encountered over the past several years. And again, it's just being mindful and aware and thinking, okay, I've noticed these things. Let's maybe keep tabs on that or reach out to that person, try to strike a relationship. And if you're constantly getting blocked by a third party, then you could possibly call the Polaris hotline and offer a tip. And that's another way that you can certainly help someone, because that will be rerouted to wherever that local tip is given, whatever service provider, whether that is Project Fight, one of our 5 locations across the state, or another entity in that area.
Okay, and that National Human Trafficking Hotline is that we have that number. It's 1-888-373-7888. And again, you said that will connect you with resources in the area in which you live. So, or if you want to report information, that's the number to call.
Absolutely.
We have about a minute left in the program. As you look at all the work that's been done to educate the public and to provide support for victims, what more needs to be done, and what are your hopes for human trafficking work here in North Carolina in 2017?
I think a huge thing, we talked a little bit, is that this is a criminal enterprise, is a business for some people. So when we look at that supply and demand, the idea of demand needs to be addressed on both sides for sexual exploitation and labor exploitation. So what people can do now is you start to talk about it, follow organizations like the Salvation Army's Project Fight, Path NC, NC CAT, all of these wonderful agencies that we have in North Carolina to start learning about it. Use social media, it's a powerful platform, but also take a look at your kind of carbon footprint when it comes to trafficking. Fair trade, purchasing items that way reduces your impact on human trafficking. Because whether you're buying a shirt, whether you're buying makeup products, hygiene products, you may unintentionally be contributing to this. So being mindful in that, you can
Mindfulness makes all the difference. Lizzie Adams, Courtney Milam, both with the Salvation Army, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's Tar Heel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, or send an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week.